Stilgar ben Fafrai was the name that lived in the Fremen legends long after he passed away. At the age of 12, Stilgar took his first step towards manhood when he made peace with the Maker and became a sandrider. He joined a group of young Fremen in a raid against a Harkonnen village and earned the name Shakhan, used only by his fellow Sietch members, which is the Fremen name of the Desert Hawk. Stilgar left his home Sietch when Pardot Kynes, the well-respected Imperial ecologist who joined the Fremen, needed a team to help him with planting at one of the newer palm areas in the south. By effectively guiding the other Fremen workers, Stilgar showcased his leadership skills, leaving Kynes so impressed by his work ethic that he entrusted him with as many responsibilities as he could manage. Seeing potential in him, the planetologist took him as an assistant and brought him in the north to Sietch Tabr. Stilgar integrated quite fast into the social fabric of his new Sietch, facing only a single challenge from a young Fremen, who viewed his close relationship with Kynes as a potential threat to his position. After he triumphed in the duel, the leader of the Sietch at that time accepted him into the tribe and made it clear to any other potential challengers that he had earned his place. A year later, his position in the Sietch was solidified even more when Pardot Kynes arranged for him to enter a blood brotherhood with his son, Liet-Kynes. At age 19, Stilgar married Misra, who a few years later gave birth to a stillborn daughter. And at the age of 27, he married his second wife, named Thardhar. As a member of the tribe, he followed the usual male Fremen duties. He engaged in planting activities that aimed to transform Dune into a green paradise, fought the Harkonnens and their allies when the need arose, and participated in knife combat practice with the other Sietch members. Stilgar was an imposing figure, standing well over 2 meters tall, which made him loom over his fellow Fremen. His body bore the marks of his many battles, with scars both old and new, serving as a testament to his history of hard-won victories against the Harkonnens. He embodied the unpredictable nature typical of the Fremen. One moment he could be seen comforting an injured child with gentle care, and the next he could be mercilessly pursuing an enemy with his crysknife. A significant shift among the Fremen occurred when Stilgar was 34. The unexpected death of Pardot Kynes in a cave-in at Plaster Basin set off a series of events that would change the leadership of numerous tribes, including Sietch Tabr. The old leaders, such as Forad, were regarded as remnants of a bygone era, unsuitable for a future shaped by Kynes' vision. The future was meant to be guided by younger Fremen, who had grown up with this dream of a green paradise. It was no shock to Forad when Stilgar, already recognized as the best fighter of the tribe, challenged him a few weeks after Pardot Kynes had passed away. No Fremen was surprised that Stilgar triumphed over the old man, thus confirming the inevitable change in leadership, but they were caught off guard by Liet-Kynes' unexpected arrival. He appeared on the scene, just moments after the waterman had carried away Forad's body. Misra paused while bandaging the slash wound Stilgar sustained on his right side during the fight, as everyone in the Sietch held their breath, wondering if Liet-Kynes was about to challenge his blood brother. Although Stilgar showed no emotion at the time, he later described the experience as more fearsome than facing a legion of other men alone. He was terrified that Liet might challenge him, and he couldn't tell if he was more afraid of dying or killing him in a fight. The fear was brief, ending when Kynes rushed across the blood-stained floor to embrace the new leader. After he congratulated Stilgar on his victory and confirmed that his wound was only superficial, Liet requested permission to speak to the Fremen of the tribe. Addressing the crowd, he announced that he had succeeded his father as Imperial planetologist, continuing the work on the palm areas that Pardot Kynes had started, emphasizing that Dune's ecological transformation must move forward. Sietch Tabr thrived under the leadership of Stilgar, and in his first year, he orchestrated a dozen successful raids against the Harkonnens, achieving these victories with minimal casualties. He was more forward-thinking than the previous leader and initiated a plan for a gradual expansion of the cave network. He envisioned larger areas for the Fremen factories, as well as additional classrooms to accommodate the growing number of children in the Sietch. To support the increased population, he also oversaw the construction of new wind traps and catch basins. Liet-Kynes returned to Sietch Tabr 1 year after his previous visit. During this period, he fell in love with Ferula, a skilled herbalist from Redwall Sietch, and they got married in a traditional Fremen ceremony officiated by Stilgar. The following year, their daughter Chani was born, with Stilgar promising to take care of her if her parents were unable to do so. Tragically, this promise was fulfilled sooner than expected. Around 3 years later, Ferula was caught in a rockfall and lost her life before she could be rescued. Following the dramatic event, Dr. Kynes became immersed in the ambitious mission of transforming DUNE, while also serving as a crucial link between the Fremen and the Imperial Authority, which included bribing the Spacing Guild to keep their satellites away from the Southern Hemisphere. As a result, Stilgar welcomed the little girl into his family and cared for her as if she were his daughter. For the following decade, Stilgar continued to expand the cave network and fought the Harkonnens whenever necessary. The surprise came when the Emperor decided to send their enemy back to Giedi Prime and gave the fiefdom of Arrakis to House Atreides. Stilgar was 50 years old at the time, and like the rest of his people, he welcomed the change of authority with a mix of hope and skepticism. Although the new rulers were off-worlders, encouraging stories about House Atreides had reached them before their arrival. But Stilgar chose to reserve his judgment until he could see for himself if these tales held any truth. The first evidence came through Duncan Idaho, the swordmaster serving Duke Leto. Idaho was sent by Leto to contact the Fremen and reassure them that the injustices endured under the Harkonnens would come to an end. During his stay at the Sietch, Duncan embraced the Fremen tradition wholeheartedly and acted with integrity, which inevitably impressed Stilgar. Among the Fremen, there were also rumors about Duke Leto's son, Paul Atreides, with some people recalling the Mahdi legend and the prophecy of the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. Whispers of his mother, being a Bene Gesserit, only fueled their hope that he might be the long-awaited savior they had been waiting for their whole life. When Duncan Idaho left the Sietch to report back to his duke in Liet-Kynes, the Fremen learned of a Harkonnen scheme to deploy mercenaries disguised as Fremen against the Atreides. Given the positive impression Idaho had left, Stilgar sent a courier named Turok with a warning and soon followed with a small group of men. On his way to the Atreides headquarters, the courier was intercepted and gravely injured by the disguised Fremen, who afterward launched an attack on Idaho and his men. But during the fight, Stilgar and his followers also joined, resulting in numerous Harkonnen casualties. Duncan discovered the wounded Fremen and decided to transport him to the house medics, but he eventually passed away. Idaho brought Turok to the headquarters, surprised that the Fremen leader did not claim the body that held the tribe's precious water. Stilgar followed him silently, because he wanted to observe with his own eyes the true nature of the man that Duncan served so faithfully, and he was curious how the Atreides would handle the body of the deceased Fremen, knowing that the Harkonnens showed no respect for the dead or their water. He also wanted to see what Idaho intended to do with the crysknife he had found, as he caught the dying Fremen trying to throw it away. When they arrive at the headquarters, Stilgar prohibits Idaho from drawing the crysknife in front of the other Atreides men, because in his view, this act would defile the honorable blade. Duke Leto not only resists the challenge to his authority, but also highlights the Atreides' tradition of repaying their debts, and asks if there is any way of honoring the dead Fremen. Stilgar is sufficiently impressed by his words to offer a water tribute by spitting on the table in front of the Duke. The Atreides soldiers are offended by this because they misunderstand Stilgar's gesture, but Idaho quickly explains the significance of water to a Fremen, expresses his appreciation for the tribute, and mirrors the gesture. To establish a link with the Fremen, Leto proposes a dual allegiance for Duncan Idaho, which is agreed upon by Stilgar. As he prepares to depart, the Fremen leader decides to leave the courier's body with the Atreides as a fair trade for Duncan's water, confident that it will be handled with honor. Stilgar learns the real reason behind the Emperor's decision to give Arrakis to Duke Leto, as he receives the news of a brutal Harkonnen and Sardaukar assault that wiped out House Atreides. He received an urgent message from Liet-Kynes stating that the Duke had been killed, and his concubine Lady Jessica had fled into the desert with Paul. Duncan Idaho sacrificed his life to ensure their escape from the Sardaukar troops, and Liet himself would pay with his life, though Stilgar did not know it at the time. He was instructed to lead a group from Sietch Tabr and to find the two off-worlders in the desert. True to his Fremen nature, Liet did not insist that both mother and son should be saved. If either of them were deemed unfit to survive in the desert among the Fremen, Stilgar had the authority to make a decision that would benefit the tribe. He observed them trying to survive for a couple of days, and he was impressed by Paul's clever use of a thumper to attract the sandworms, recognizing their bravery in daring to journey across the open desert. The strength of the tribe is all that matters, so Stilgar decides not to kill Paul, seeing a significant potential in him due to his youth and the possibility that he could be taught the ways of the Fremen. He also couldn't shake the thought of the old legends, intrigued by the possibility that the rumors might be true, and Paul could indeed be the one who would lead them to paradise. When it comes to Jessica, Stilgar believes she is too old to learn their ways, thus eliminating her and taking her water is the best solution for the tribe. Anticipating the imminent danger, she pretends to fall on the ground, and when Stilgar approaches with his blade, she quickly disarms him and renders him helpless against the rocky terrain. As the other Fremen attempt to intervene, he stops them, acknowledging her impressive combat skills and the potential benefits of learning this unique fighting style. He ultimately decides to welcome both of them into his tribe and assures them of their safety. As they get ready to move on, Stilgar provides them with distinctive kerchiefs, ensuring they are identifiable as part of his tribe in case they get lost, and assigns his niece Chani the task of keeping a close watch on Paul. They journeyed through the night and reached the Cave of the Ridges as the light of dawn rose on the horizon. They need to rest during the day and resume their journey after sunset, giving Stilgar the chance to speak with Jessica privately. He shows her in the distance his fellow Fremen, who are working hard in the heat of the day, gathering spice to offer bribes to the Spacing Guild. This is a crucial part of their efforts to reshape the climate of Arrakis, and while it may take several generations before witnessing the complete fruition of their goal, the Fremen remain steadfast in their ambition to transform Dune into a green paradise. During their conversation, Jessica wonders if she has inadvertently challenged his authority, to which he clarifies that it wasn't an official challenge. Their survival depends on being led by the strongest individual among them, and since she has outmatched him in combat, it was only a matter of time before she would be expected to challenge him for the leadership of the tribe. To avoid this, Stilgar first offers her the option of becoming one of his wives. But Jessica decides to become the new Sayadina, eventually succeeding the old Reverend Mother when the time comes. As dusk approaches, the atmosphere of the cave grows increasingly tense, and Stilgar finds out that Jamis, a member of his tribe, intends to test Jessica's worthiness of becoming a Sayadina by challenging Paul as her champion. Stilgar strongly opposes this and tries to convince Jamis to retract the challenge from Paul, but his attempts are in vain. Driven by a desire to rid himself of the shame he felt from being disarmed by the boy, the Fremen invokes the Amtal rule. The two of them strip down their still suits, and the duel begins. As Paul gets the upper hand, he offers the Fremen a chance to surrender, but Stilgar insists that the duel can end only one way. Paul hesitates to give the final blow, which starts to irritate Stilgar, who thinks that he is sadistically toying with his opponent. The 15-year-old boy eventually executes a decisive strike with the crysknife, leaving the Fremen lifeless on the ground. After the fight, Stilgar finds out that Paul was not taking pleasure in mocking Jamis, but rather he was hesitant because he has never killed a man before. His perception shifts as he hears this, now respecting Paul's actions, and in a gesture of honor, Stilgar grants him the Fremen name Usul. According to Fremen tradition, Paul must now choose a name for himself, and Stilgar is impressed when Paul chooses the name Muad'Dib, inspired by the tenacity of the desert mouse. Following Jamis' funeral, Stilgar gave Paul his water, and they all ventured into a cavern with towering ceilings, hosting a large catch basin filled with a significant amount of water. With meticulous precision, the water is poured into the pool, and the Fremen leader uses this opportunity to explain the importance of this sacred place. Stilgar made it clear that no Fremen would ever dare touch the water of this pool without the permission of the tribe. Under the glow of the moonlight, the group reaches the Sietch, and the news of Liet-Kynes' death fills Stilgar with a mix of profound grief and anger. It's clear to him that the Harkonnens are behind it, despite their efforts to disguise it as an accident. He fulfills his tribal responsibilities by introducing Paul to Hara, Jamis' widow, explaining that he is now responsible for looking after the family. Preparations are made, as the tribe is getting ready to leave Sietch Tabr and head south to escape the relentless pursuit of the Sardaukar. The elderly Reverend Mother is too frail to make the journey, so Stilgar makes arrangements for the Sayadina to go through the spice agony. As Jessica successfully ingests the water of life and transforms the poison into a harmless liquid, Stilgar acknowledges that she has finally proved herself. Over the next 2 years, Stilgar and Paul develop a strong friendship, and soon the moment arrives when Paul has to face the trial of becoming a sandrider. Stilgar took it upon himself to guide him through every aspect of riding a sandworm, sharing his knowledge and even presenting him with a thumper as a gift. His success in riding the sandworm brought with it a growing impatience among the young Fremen for Paul to challenge Stilgar for leadership of the tribe. Although Stilgar was a formidable opponent for anyone, the Fremen believed that Paul possessed exceptional abilities that exceeded those of an ordinary human. Even more so, Stilgar himself said he wouldn't even raise his blade if it would come to that. The group spotted in the distance a band of smugglers attempting to land and harvest spice on their territory. They set up a trap and successfully capture them, only to discover that their leader is Gurney Halleck, Paul's former mentor. Halleck and his men join the Fremen, but it turns out that some of the smugglers are actually disguised Sardaukar agents who launch a surprise attack. Despite this, Stilgar and his fellow Fremen handled the situation with ease, killing the majority of the Sardaukar and capturing the rest. When Paul formally introduces Gurney to Stilgar, the Fremen leader initially feels a tinge of jealousy. After all, Gurney had been a part of Paul's life since he was a child, but they eventually shake hands and bond over their mutual hatred for the Harkonnens. Addressing the Fremen crowd back at the Sietch, Paul makes it clear that he has no intention to challenge his friend for leadership because Stilgar is too important for the tribe. Instead, he declared himself the Duke of Arrakis, instructing Stilgar to pledge his loyalty and continue as the leader of Sietch Tabr. Shortly after that, Paul decided to drink the water of life, and after 3 weeks of unconsciousness, he awakened as the Kwisatz Haderach. Emperor Shaddam IV, accompanied by Baron Harkonnen and 5 legions of Sardaukar troops, landed on Arrakis. Stilgar, Gurney Halleck, and Paul are doing some reconnaissance as the enemy sets up their camp behind the shield wall. A massive sandstorm approaches, a natural ally that complements the Fremen's battle strategies, and Halleck unleashes the atomic weapons, shattering the shield wall. Even the Emperor himself is stunned, as Fremen warriors mounted on sandworms charge in a battle against the Imperial forces. The Battle of Arrakeen ended with the entire House Harkonnen and Sardaukar forces being annihilated. Following the subsequent negotiations, Paul ascended as the new Padishah Emperor, taking Princess Irulan as his political wife. After finally getting rid of the enemy that had oppressed his people for so long, Stilgar found himself drawn into a realm where the lines between myth and reality were seamlessly intertwined, as he started to unquestionably see Paul as a godlike figure. He listens in amazement, as Paul describes a world where water falls from the sky and plants grow everywhere. This was the transformation of a fearsome Fremen, who once was just a friend of Paul, into a religious follower who worships Lisan al-Gaib. One of the first decisions Paul took as emperor was to appoint Stilgar as the planetary governor of Arrakis and a commander for the Holy War. Stilgar left the authority of the individual Sietches to their respective leaders, and continued to work closely with Muad'Dib as both war master and advisor. Noticing her strong desire to become part of his family, he decided to take Hara as his wife, as she was no longer Paul's responsibility. In his new role as an imperial servant, Stilgar found himself confronting challenges never encountered in the harsh deserts of Dune. The complexities of court politics, interplanetary diplomacy, and similar concerns consumed much of his time, often more than he would have liked. His heart still lay in military affairs, and the Emperor would sometimes call upon him to deal with particularly difficult or delicate situations during the Holy War. Despite the occasional longing for the simplicity of his past life, Stilgar adapted to his new duties with a surprising resilience, managing to navigate the first 12 years of Paul's reign with relatively little emotional damage. His dark hair is starting to turn gray around the edges, yet his blue eyes, framed by thick brows, still hold their hawk-like gaze. Stilgar was around 64 years old when the Jihad ended. With 90 planets across the galaxy left barren, 500 more heavily affected, and a staggering 61 billion lives claimed by the brutal war. The sole planet to escape any type of conflict was Caladan, the homeworld of House Atreides, with Lady Jessica and Gurney Halleck being there the whole time. As Minister of State, Stilgar took his diplomatic duties seriously. During the Imperial Council meeting held in Arrakeen, he was in charge of bringing forward important matters, and he was involved in settling the Tupile Treaty and the situation involving the Ixian Confederacy. The Guild was pressing for the Emperor's signature on a document that would ensure the secrecy of Planet Tupile, which served as a sanctuary planet for the Great Houses. For the last 10 years, Paul had refused to sign, but he finally agreed on the condition that the Guild force the Ixian Confederacy to comply with the Imperial tax. In response, they stopped all trade with the Ixians, who relied on the Guild for transportation, had no choice but to submit. Stilgar handled several other matters during the council meeting, including reports of Sardaukar military exercises on Seleucus Secundus, the Bene Gesserit's request for Paul to produce an heir with Irulan, which he ultimately declined, and the Guild's request for an embassy on Dune, which was approved. When the Guild navigator Edric arrived on Arrakis, he was accompanied by the Ghola of Duncan Idaho under the new name Hate. Stilgar immediately recognized this as a Talaxis scheme to poison the Emperor's mind. He tried to convince Paul that this was not the real Duncan Idaho and urged him to send the Ghola away, but the Emperor eventually chose to accept the gift. On one of the following days, Stilgar and Paul found themselves standing just inside the doorway of the training room, as they unexpectedly caught Alia practicing her combat skills completely naked. Both of them scolded her for such behavior, and Stilgar bluntly stated that she needed to be married soon. She felt a mix of anger and embarrassment as she struggled to maintain her Bene Gesserit composure, which the Fremen had shattered with almost no effort. Despite this, Stilgar insists that his words are spoken out of love. Shifting the conversation to serious matters, they discuss the possibility that the Spacing Guild might try to capture a sandworm, aiming to establish spice production on another planet. Stilgar wants to prevent this by expanding the patrols, but realizes that these measures would not be enough to stop the guild indefinitely. He knows that a sandworm's survival depends on the unique ecosystem of Dune, particularly the sand plankton and little makers, and he fears that the guild might eventually find a way to overcome this challenge. What troubles Stilgar even more is the growing realization that Paul, despite his powerful prescience, cannot foresee the guild's actions or intentions. This is a dangerous weakness, and he knows that the guild will inevitably try to use this against him. The Emperor wants to gather more information about a potential conspiracy against him, so he invites Edric and Scytale into the reception room for a conversation. Stilgar, always vigilant, felt uneasy seeing the guild navigator so close to Paul as he obeyed the command to move Edric's tank closer. His instincts kept him tense, hand hovering over the crysknife beneath his robe, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The tension in the room was visible, but eventually the exchange came to an end, and with a questioning look, Stilgar silently asked Paul if it was time to eliminate Edric. Paul gives a subtle negative hand signal as Scytale pushes Edric's tank towards the door, leaving the room. Once they are gone, Stilgar, addressing Paul by his Fremen name Usul, tells him that inviting that creature over was a foolish and risky decision. The High Priest Korba enters the room shortly after that, carrying a collection of film reels containing historical records Paul wants Stilgar to study, but the Fremen sees this as a waste of time, asserting that he already knows everything there is to know about the Imperium. Paul, however, insists that he needs a broader perspective, urging him to learn about the golden age of planet Earth. Genghis Khan and Hitler, names that Stilgar never heard before, have also killed millions in ancient times, but Paul believes that no one could ever surpass the destruction caused by his holy war. There's a widespread belief that those victories have led countless followers into the light, but they were actually led into darkness. A few days after the meeting, the face dancer Scytale, disguised as the daughter of a high-ranking commander in the Holy War, visited Paul. She brought a message, claiming that her father Uthim urgently needed to speak with the Emperor about a conspiracy. Paul knew the girl from his early days among the Fremen, and he wasn't deceived by Scytale's disguise, but he chose to go anyway. Arriving at his home, Paul discovers that Uthim is gravely ill. Struggling through his coughs, he informs Paul that the Fremen living nearby are plotting against him. He then hands Paul a small mysterious dwarf known as Bijaz, a Talaxam master who knows the names of the conspirators. As they leave the house, Stilgar suddenly appears, his steps striking the ground like a war machine. There's a sense of unease in the air, so Paul quickly explains Bijaz's importance to Stilgar, and without hesitation, the Fremen hurries off with the dwarf. Paul then commanded his security team to investigate the neighboring house, and suddenly, a scream echoed through the night that a stone burner was found. Instinctively shielding his face with his arm, Paul watches Uthim's house and the surrounding area erupting into flames, blinding everyone present. The sound of approaching ornithopters filled the air, as Stilgar rushed back to Paul, gazing with despair at his damaged eyes. Paul touches his face, feeling the tears running down his cheek, and assures him that while his physical sight is gone, his prescience is stronger than ever. Stilgar is fully aware of the Fremen tradition regarding the blind, and voices his concern that they must conceal this condition. Paul, however, insists that his blindness should not be hidden, and orders that none of the people blinded by the fire be abandoned in the desert. A week later, the turmoil surrounding the stone burner incident finally subsides, leaving everyone wondering how the Emperor can still see without his eyes. In the Grand Council chamber, Stilgar leads Korba's trial, who stands accused of helping with the stone burner and conspiring with traitors to overthrow the Emperor. The High Priest declares that he is innocent and invokes his Fremen rights, to which Stilgar agrees that the law must be upheld, despite a sharp glance from Alia. The Emperor thanks him for reminding him of the law and orders the guards to take the prisoner back to his cell. As the trial concludes and the crowd begins to disperse, Paul expresses his gratitude towards Stilgar for executing his role flawlessly. The foundation upon which Stilgar had anchored himself was shattered past repair, as he lost both his beloved emperor and niece at the same time. When Chani and Paul traveled to Sietch Tabr, she unexpectedly went into labor. What should have been a moment of happiness with the birth of their twins turned into tragedy as she died during childbirth. Sietch appears and tries to negotiate by threatening the newborn children, but Paul manages to kill him with a blade by gaining access to his son's eyes. Now Paul is not only physically blind, but he has also lost his prescient visions as well, and he embraces the Fremen tradition of a journey into the desert. This would ensure the loyalty of the Fremen for his children, leaving Stilgar as a guardian for Leto II and Ganima, and his sister Alia as the regent. Despite his wishes, Alia and Stilgar executes the conspirators responsible for the Emperor's downfall, including Reverend Mother Mohayim and the guild navigator Edric. Princess Irulan is spared, as she renounces the sisterhood and commits to educating the children. In the decade that followed, Stilgar faced quite some hardship, which is believed to have taken a significant toll on him. Just 2 years after losing his niece and Paul to the desert, his first wife passed away from a sudden fever, bringing an end to a companionship that had spanned almost 50 years. During the ceremony meant to release her spirit, it was said that Stilgar gave water to the dead, being one of the rare moments in his life when he shed tears. Alia's time as regent was fraught with turmoil, but the most devastating aspect was her gradual transformation into abomination, as she fell under the dominance of a powerful ancestral personality. Meanwhile, a blind religious leader has emerged among the Fremen, denouncing the injustices perpetuated by the religious authority and the societal changes within the Fremen community. Known simply as the Preacher, there are whispers that he may be Paul Atreides himself. Now at the age of 73, Stilgar finds himself wandering in Sietch Tabr, as he often does at night, quietly checking on the sleeping twins, Leto and Ganima. Wearing his hooded robe, he gazes at the 9-year-old siblings in awe, thinking that as long as they are alive, Muad'Dib and everything he represented endures. His mind is invaded by troubled thoughts as he ponders the idea of killing them. He reflects on the past, recalling when the Fremen's dream of a Messiah was just a dream. But after discovering their Mahdi, they unleashed upon the universe countless messianic dreams. The religious fanaticism had spread, and now every world conquered by the Holy War dreams of a prophesied savior. He now harbors resentment towards the deification of Paul, especially since he was one of his most loyal followers. The religion that once inspired him had grown into a bureaucratic monster, merging faith and governance into an oppressive system. Breaking the law became akin to committing a sin, and questioning authority is considered blasphemy. He contemplates the transformation of his home planet, with the vast desert of Arrakis now half its former size, giving way to greenery. Rain had already been recorded on the planet, with rain clouds being occasionally seen in the sky, and even a flash flood had been reported that had killed 8 Fremen. Before this event, the word drowned didn't even exist in the language of Dune. He put a lot of effort into this transformation throughout the years, and now that it is finally happening, Stilgar feels that it's not like the dream he had. Watching his planet evolve, he couldn't help but feel that the true essence of Fremen culture was slipping away, and deep inside he knew he had changed as well. The Fremen are becoming quite careless in their water discipline, a change that stirs a quiet longing for the old ways. And his thoughts drift to Dr. Kynes, without whom this transformation wouldn't have been possible. Stilgar wrestles with his heavy thoughts until the early hours of the morning, his mind constantly returning to Leto and Ganima. He contemplates the dangers and what is best for his people, but in the end, his unwavering loyalty prevails, and he decides not to kill them. For the last 20 years, Jessica lived on Caladan, having rejoined the Sisterhood, and she is now coming back to Arrakis. Alia is labeled by the Bene Gesserit an abomination, and Stilgar fears that the twins might be at risk of falling into the same fate. When Jessica and Gurney Halleck arrived in Arrakeen from Caladan, they were welcomed by Alia, Irulan, and Stilgar. From a distance, Jessica catches sight of her daughter, and her worst fears are confirmed. Alia is indeed possessed. She then shifts her attention to Stilgar, noting his thick black beard, now speckled with gray, which spread across his stillsuit hood. He looks older, but his eyes still hold the same intense shade of blue that she remembers from their first encounter in the desert. As they exchange a glance, Stilgar silently confirms that he is aware of Alia's condition. On one of the following nights, Leto convinced Stilgar to join him on a journey across the sands near Sietch Tabr to a rock formation called the Attendant. Stilgar had no intention of making this journey, but Leto had threatened that he would go alone, thus forcing the old Fremen to join him. Arriving there, they both sit in silence, as Leto grapples with his inner turmoil while watching the sunrise, with a restless Stilgar by his side. The memories of passing through this area with Paul many years ago resurfaces in Stilgar's mind, while he is scanning the surroundings for any potential dangers. When they finally break the silence, Leto voices his concerns about the Empire's current path, lamenting the lack of focus on human life. He considers the risky possibility of entering a spice trance to enhance his prescience and gain a clearer vision of the future, but Stilgar fears that this could destroy him. Leto then shares 3 troubling future paths he has seen in his visions. During their deep conversation, Leto tries to convince Stilgar, who remains stubborn as usual, that his wisdom far exceeds his youthful appearance. He warns him about the dangers posed by Alia, noting how she exploits the Fremen desire to resist change. He reminds Stilgar of the time he and Paul met up with Gurney at Habanya Ridge, and Paul prioritized saving a spice harvester over the lives of men, a decision criticized by Halleck. Duke Leto had always valued human life above all else, and now Stilgar must do the same. If Leto were to lose his life or disappear in the near future, Stilgar must take Ganima and flee from Sietch Tabr, as she is the only hope for the survival of the Atreides. As they prepare to walk back to Sietch Tabr, Leto asks Stilgar something that led him in a profound thought. He couldn't help but think of Leto's comment on how beautiful the young women are this year. It is true. Their faces glow serenely with water richness, and they often venture outside without the need for stillsuits. This was a stark contrast to the old Arrakis, where the cave metropolis culture of the Sietch thrived, with their intricate seals and moisture traps at every entrance. Now the Sietches are a relic of the past, being replaced by villages, with houses often built from mud bricks, with transparent windows to let the sunlight in. He reflects on the transformation of Fremen culture, which contrasts his own doubts and fears. Stilgar feels like he is part of a dying breed, but this could be a sign that the Fremen are becoming more like the inhabitants of other planets in the Imperium. While others had always dreamed of starting a new life on another planet, this had never been a possibility for his people. Their way of life had forced them to focus inward, rather than looking beyond their desert world. Before Muad'Dib, the Fremen had been conditioned to believe in failure, never to believe in the possibility of success. As they reach the entrance to Sietch Tabr, Stilgar finally realizes the dangerous path that Alia is setting. He begins to wonder how a seemingly simple comment from Leto had sparked such deep thoughts in him. Stilgar had significantly increased the number of guards around the twins, yet he sees little value in it. He worries that Leto is going to lead Ganima into danger, knowing that she will follow wherever he goes. He has to deal with this situation alone because he can't talk to Alia about it, and Irulan cannot be trusted since she reports everything to her. Later that day, Fremen from all tribes gather in the Grand Audience Chamber to celebrate Jessica's return as their Reverend Mother. Looking in the crowd, Stilgar notices Ganima engaged in conversation with her grandmother. He is captivated by her red gold hair and intense blue eyes, which strongly reminds him of Chani. Despite her occasional teasing and light-hearted remarks, Ganima holds a deep affection for Stilgar, much like a daughter would for a father. The old Fremen feels overwhelmed by the twins, but he also recognizes that they are his highest responsibility. And Stilgar reflects on the ancestral memories as he can finally empathize with them, acknowledging the difficulty of being born with such immense knowledge. Not long after, the twins quietly slipped out of the Sietch and ventured into the desert, to the same area Leto had previously visited with Stilgar. While everyone was searching for them, they were ambushed by 2 lazy tigers, sent by House Carino from Salissa Secundus. They eventually managed to kill the tigers, though Ganima sustained injuries to her leg and arm. After Leto helps treat her wounds, he embarks on his own journey, a dangerous avenue he must walk alone. Ganima then returns alone to the Sietch, having hypnotized herself to believe that Leto was killed by the tigers. When Stilgar saw the injured girl, his heart sank with shock and fear. After she recounted the harrowing story of the tiger assault, Stilgar rushed into the desert, desperate to find Leto. The evidence he found, including a blood-stained robe that had been ripped by sharp claws, convinced him that Leto was dead, and he quickly realized that all pointed to a sinister plot by House Carino. Stilgar has been up all night with Duncan Idaho, who is desperately trying to persuade him to run away with Ganima. The old Fremen, however, thinks that everyone there is safe and stands his ground in his decision that Sietch Tabr is neutral in this whole thing. As their intense conversation came to an end, Javid entered the room, the Fremen rumored to have an affair with Alia. Realizing that reason would not sway him in any way, Duncan stabs Javid in the chest, and with a string of insults and a sharp slap across the face, he succeeds in driving Stilgar into a blind rage. Overcome with fury, he reacted by stabbing Idaho in the abdomen, upward through the diaphragm into the heart. After his anger subsides, Stilgar stares at the 2 bodies and realizes that Alia would be forced to publicly avenge Idaho's death, even if she secretly welcomed this turn of events. He takes Ganima, Irulan, and his most loyal Fremen followers and leads them out of Sietch Tabr into the desert, having no other option but to join the rebels. It's been months since Stilgar and his group fled from the Sietch, and they are now hiding in one of the settlements attacked by a mysterious creature known as the Desert Demon. There are reports from the northern Sietches of search flights, scouring the desert for Stilgar, who is now awaiting for a meeting to negotiate. Agarvis and his people meet with Stilgar's group to discuss terms, offering Sietch Tabr back and a pardon for everyone in his group on the condition that Ganima is handed over. As expected, Stilgar refuses the offer, but this is part of Alia's plan, as she had also dispatched soldiers to attack the camp and capture everyone. Stilgar and Irulan were taken to the dungeons beneath the temple, and his only comfort was that he managed to kill the traitorous Agarvis. This small victory was of little comfort, as he suspects that Alia had likely chosen this to happen. Imprisoned in a dark cell, Stilgar was unaware of the dramatic confrontation between Leto and Alia, and he was also spared from witnessing the death of the blind preacher, who was indeed his friend Usul. His first encounter with the new regime comes when Leto frees him and Irulan by smashing the door open and tearing their chains off the wall. Stilgar is expected in the keep, and once he arrives, Jessica tells him that she forgives him for Duncan Idaho's death, understanding the true events that had transpired between the two. He wants to discuss some serious matters with Leto, explaining that he doesn't like what the Fremen have become, and he wishes for his people to go back to the old ways. Ganima warns him that the desert is dying, and questions what is he going to do when both the desert and the sandworms vanish. Within 100 years, less than 50 sandworms will remain alive, all confined to a reservation, with their spice reserved solely for the Spacing Guild at astronomical prices. But Stilgar doesn't want to believe this, thinking it's just a trick to keep the Fremen loyal. While the other tribe leaders were struck with fear as they pledged their allegiance to the new ruler, Stilgar's thoughts were clouded by a somber reflection, as he couldn't help but grieve for Leto. He wondered what dreadful visions the boy had experienced in his prophetic dreams that made such a grim transformation necessary. Although he won't be alive to witness it, Stilgar reflects on the future of the Fremen as he listens to Leto's vivid depictions of the transformation awaiting Arrakis. He finds himself opposed to the vision of that new world, a planet without sandworms, without melange, and devoid of the boundless desert that had long served as the ultimate arena for testing one's physical and mental limits. The life he had always known, the Fremen way of existence, was on the brink of extinction. When Stilgar returned to the Sietch, he was a shadow of his former self, weakened both mentally and physically. In the old days, a young Fremen of the Sietch would likely have dared to challenge Stilgar, and he would have succeeded, but the spirit of the desert people seemed to have faded, and no such challenge ever came. As a result of consuming spice throughout his life, Stilgar lived quite long, but it is believed that throughout his remaining days, he was burdened by a feeling of deep sorrow, haunted by the future that awaited the Fremen. Not long after his death, God Emperor Leto prohibited the tradition, where Sietch members fight for the leadership of the tribe. He chose a loyal and easy-to-manipulate young man to become the leader of the tribes, and this decision was easily accepted by the Fremen. This was a confirmation of Stilgar's deepest fears about the transformation of his people in what eventually became known as the Museum Fremen.